What's up guys, it's Devin here, back again with another video. Today I want to talk about how Google is kind of killing off their messaging platform, Allo. But before I get too deep into that, I wanted to talk about what Allo is for the people that aren't really familiar with it. Allo was announced at Google I/O in 2016 alongside the much more successful video chatting app called Duo. While Google did not specifically state this, it appeared that they were trying to compete with Apple's iMessage and FaceTime. Allo being the messaging platform for consumers, and Duo being the video chat counterpart, except the one main difference is that these applications were going to be available for everyone. That's iOS and Android. Google originally had big plans for Allo, and even included it in their compatibility test suite for Android OEMs. That meant that every new phone shipping with Google services also had to have Allo installed. A light version of Allo was also built into Google Play services, so users could actually receive messages by phone number without ever having used the app before. Users could view a message, reply to it, add emojis, but they were limited to some of the other features like stickers, and while you were using the light version, you were prompted to be able to install the full application for more features and being able to continue a conversation and look through your conversation history and whatnot. But it was really cool that they actually included a very basic bare bones version in Google Play services to try and make it easier to transition people over to that. The tech community was in general excited about Allo when it was announced, hoping that it would be the iMessage for everyone. But when it was released in the later half of 2016, it was kind of considered a flop. Consumers felt misled on what the product would be, and at launch there was a lack of features, and in general kind of a lack of direction on where the product was going or who it was really for. It really turned out that Allo was more of a WhatsApp competitor than an iMessage competitor, and if you've used both of these apps, you'll know that they are quite different. A big feature that users were expecting was SMS support in Allo, something that would actually make Allo feel more like iMessage, but they decided not to do that because Apple does not have alternate SMS app support. So if you're using iOS, you have to use your default SMS app. There's no way you can get around that. And so the experience between iOS and Android would have been different. With Allo, Google was trying to kind of create a new application, a new messaging platform that had equal ground on both platforms, not favoring one or the other. And so they just simply didn't include that feature and didn't really include it as part of their roadmap, even though consumers kind of assumed they would based on the popularity of iMessage. There was also no desktop or web client at launch. There was no chat backup. There was a lot of other features lacking that just made this seem really inferior to any other messaging application. And aside from it kind of just coming preloaded with Android, there wasn't a whole lot of reason for anyone to use it, let alone to switch over their entire contact list over to this new messaging app that probably isn't going to be as enjoyable as your other apps are. However, I will give Google credit. Over time, they slowly chipped away at Allo. They added features here, they added features there. We eventually had a solid web client, chat backup to Google Drive, smart stickers, a lot of other things, more sticker packs continuing to come out, which was really nice. And in general, it became a very, very enjoyable messaging app to use. I actually used it among a lot of people and had a great time with it. I had talked to most of my friends over Allo by the end of its lifespan. A couple of the notable features was GIF searching that came pre-built into the app, so even if you had like a GIF keyboard or something like that, you could still use the in-app version, and if someone didn't have an extra keyboard installed, someone who may have been more of a basic user who's not interested in tweaking their phone, then they could have GIFs right there, and it just made the whole experience a lot more accessible and a lot more fun to more people. In fact, they even included meme searching through the mobile app by the end of it. So if you wanted a still picture and not a GIF, you could search for that and find a lot of really funny stuff. So they were making steady improvements to the app over time. I think in general, the app turned into a really solid experience and I was really hopeful for it. So why did they decide to kill it off, and what are they doing exactly? Well, fast forward to today, and in general, Allo has not been adopted nearly as much as Google had really hoped for. Regardless of its short life, it has not proven successful, and Google has made the decision to stop investing resources into the project sooner than later and reinvest them into something that it believes will be more productive. And that thing is RCS, also known as Rich Communication Services. To keep things simple for the sake of this video, RCS is essentially the evolution of SMS and MMS. As I'm sure you may have noticed by now, regular old texting has a lot of limitations. Long messages are often broken up into several smaller messages, and there's no guarantee that they'll actually come in the order that they're supposed to. You're also limited to sending plain old text, a picture, and a video, and the pictures and videos are actually heavily compressed. If you have used an Android phone and tried to send a picture or a video to someone and noticed that it looked terrible on the other end, especially when it comes to videos, that's why. It's actually a limitation at the carrier level, a limitation of MMS itself. Apple has been able to get around it with iMessage because they actually circumvent the carrier. They send everything over their servers when they detect that someone else is using iMessage and completely avoid the carrier. This is how WhatsApp and every other messaging platform also works, but they just don't have the ties into the actual SMS functionality of the phone usually. Just like SMS, RCS works at the carrier level and removes a lot of the limitations that we have and opens the doors for more iMessage-like functionality and actually a lot more. Back in September of 2015, Google actually purchased a company called Jibe that was working on a universal RCS standard for all carriers. Up until that time, various US carriers had actually implemented their own version of RCS that wasn't compatible with each other. So AT&T, Verizon, and even some others actually had some of their own features built into certain phones that only worked if you were also using those same phones on the same carrier. One notable experience I actually had was with a friend of mine who had a Samsung Galaxy S3. He was on AT&T, and he showed me that with this one contact he had that actually turned out to also be on AT&T, also had a Samsung phone, when they were messaging with each other, he could see when she had read his message, and he could see when she was typing. So he couldn't really work or do this with anyone else because nobody else had the same RCS compatibility because AT&T couldn't talk to Verizon, Verizon couldn't talk to anyone else. It was all broken, fragmented, and only worked inside that inclusive environment. Of course, everything fell back to SMS, so it didn't really make a difference and it only enhanced the user experience, but it wasn't really wide-reaching. Over the last couple of years, Google has been working with all the major US carriers and also all the major US smartphone makers to agree to adopt this new universal RCS standard and make it so everyone can talk to each other and everyone can benefit from these awesome new features. Now that they are getting rid of Allo, they are actually betting it all on RCS and actually now calling it something simply called chat. Android Messages has actually had RCS for a while now, so this isn't actually something super new, and Sprint was the first carrier in the US to adopt this universal RCS profile. So if you're a Sprint user and you have Android Messages and you're on a more modern version of Android, you should be able to actually use RCS and communicate with other people that both have Sprint and Android Messages enabled. You'll get read receipts, typing indicators. I believe you'll be able to send larger pictures and files and stuff like that. So if you can, I would say try it out and let me know how it works for you. I haven't actually seen this working in the wild yet myself. Google has actually moved the entire Allo team over to the Android Messages team so that they can focus on the user experience of the app, focus on the features, and prepare for a wider rollout of RCS across the US. Overall, I think this is a good move for Google and mostly a good move for the consumers. I really enjoyed Allo, and I was really hopeful that it would get adopted more as Google kind of labeled it as its primary messaging platform for consumers going forward. To be honest, I'm not quite as excited about RCS. While RCS is an obvious improvement over SMS and SMS, I'm not doubting that for a split second, it still has some limitations that would have been nice to have avoided. The biggest issue here is that RCS still goes through the carrier just like SMS, very much so unlike the other messaging platforms we have right now, and that means that really the carrier is in complete control. And on top of that, you're really not going to get any end-to-end encryption with your messages. So the carrier will have complete access to everything available through your SMS or your text messages, I guess whatever they're going to be called from there on. Any pictures you send, any files you send, all the video chats you may do over RCS. So it's really going to be something to be, you're going to have to weigh on you, if you're going to use that or what you use that for. So I think it's nice to have the improvements. We're not really losing anything. We're only gaining features over SMS. But to me, it's not the be-all, end-all solution. While I am very excited to try out RCS or chat as it's going to be called, I'm not really going to be using it for my primary means of communication with my, friends and family. I'm not going to go back to using basic texting through the carrier. Instead, I'm going to go back to a messaging app that I was using before called Telegram. Telegram is a very polished app that has a lot of really awesome features, including group chats, end-to-end encrypted chats, stickers, multi-device support, cross-platform apps to kind of be a companion with that, including web apps and a Linux application that all work very, very well. There's also end-to-end encrypted voice calls and a whole lot more. It's a really well done app, and it continues to get better and better with updates. Overall, I had really high hopes for Google's messaging app Allo, and once again, they've disappointed me and pretty much the rest of the entire world with their messaging efforts. Starting with kind of like not really explaining what they were going to do with it too much at the beginning when they announced it, to releasing with really bare bones features and, honestly, no real reason to use that over any other messaging app, and then killing it off so early. It's not been out for 2 years, not even close, so I don't know, it's very disappointing, it's very disheartening, and I'm really not interested in trusting Google with my messaging efforts going forward, at least not right now. They're going to have to do a lot and prove themselves before I invest switching over my entire contact list into one of their platforms, just so they can possibly just say, oh, nope, we're going to try something else now. It's not really something I'm terribly interested in. I think from a business standpoint and somewhat a consumer standpoint, investing in RCS so heavily is a pretty good decision by Google. Everybody uses SMS still, somewhat here in the US, so having more features available is just going to be better. People are going to have a better experience, and if they're going to go use another chat application, they're going to do it. And if people are using iMessage, they're still going to use iMessage. I guess that's also all assuming that Apple adopts RCS, which they have not agreed to yet. So we will see, but I don't think it's going to change a whole lot. I think it's going to make texting a little bit nicer, but that's really about it. In the future, I may make a more in-depth video about Telegram, what I like about it, some of the features. So if that sounds interesting to any of you guys, definitely be sure to let me know. Well, that's all for now. If you guys are still here watching, then thank you for listening to my rant. I really appreciate it. If you liked the video, then be sure to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment letting me know what your thoughts on Allo were. Did you ever use it? Did you like it? Did you completely avoid it? Did you ever even hear about it? I'll be very curious, because my circle of people is pretty small, and most everyone I actually, introduced them to Allo. They had not heard of it before me. Also, if you'd like to follow me online, then be sure to check out my Twitter or Steemit, depending on what you use. My handle on both platforms is ParanoidCoder. I do upload it to YouTube here, and I also upload to DTube when I can, when the website's working properly. All of my handles and all of the places is all ParanoidCoder, so follow me wherever you see fit. I also co-host a monthly podcast called Mod Chat with Mr. Mario 2011, so if you like this video, then I highly recommend you check that out. The podcast is available here on YouTube, as well as pretty much anywhere else podcasts are found, on iTunes, on Pocket Casts, so definitely check it out. It should be pretty easy to find. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.